September 27, 1994. The port of Tallinn, Estonia, is bustling with the familiar evening rhythm. Cars and trucks are carefully guided into the vast car deck of the MS Estonia. Above, passengers wave goodbye to the shore, their faces lit by the fading daylight. For many, this is a routine journey, a mini cruise and ferry service connecting the newly independent Estonia to the west. The ship, a national symbol of pride, casts off its lines and heads into the dark waters of the Baltic Sea. The night is clear, the mood on board is cheerful, and the sea seems calm. But as the Estonia sailed further from the safety of the coast, the Baltic Sea was waking up, and deep within the steel structure of the ship's bow, a series of metallic groans began to echo, unheard by the laughing passengers above. They had no idea that in just a few hours, their world would be turned upside down, and the MS Estonia would become the center of one of the deadliest maritime disasters in modern history. Let's set the scene. There are two main elements on a collision course this night. The first is the ship itself, the MS Estonia. Built in 1980, she was a 15,500-ton cruise ferry over 155 meters long, a giant of the Baltic. On this voyage, she carried 803 passengers and 186 crew members. She was a city on the water, with restaurants, bars, a sauna, and a duty-free shop. For many, she represented freedom, a link between the post-Soviet world and Scandinavia. On board tonight were Estonian families, Swedish tourists, business travelers, and even a group of police recruits heading for training. It was a cross-section of life, all housed within a single steel hull. The second character in our story is the sea. The Baltic Sea in autumn is notoriously unpredictable. That night, a storm was brewing. Weather reports predicted strong gales, with wind speeds reaching force 8 to 9 on the Beaufort scale. That's up to 88 kilometers per hour. Waves were expected to swell to between 4 and 6 meters high. While these conditions were severe, they weren't considered extraordinary for a vessel of the Estonia's size. Ships like her were built to withstand such weather. The crew was experienced, the captain was confident, and the journey from Tallinn to Stockholm was one they had made 1,000 times before. As the night wore on, these two elements, the routine life on the ship and the fury of the storm, began to clash. At approximately 0030, deep inside the ship on the car deck, a crew member on his regular patrol heard something wrong, a loud metallic banging sound coming from the bow door area, each time the ship slammed into a large wave. He reported it, but with the storm raging outside, loud noises weren't entirely unusual. The ship continued on its course. Up on the passenger decks, the party was still going. A band played in the nightclub. People were laughing, drinking, and trying to walk straight as the ship rocked from side to side. The storm was just part of the adventure, but at 0055, a sound echoed through the vessel that was impossible to ignore. A deafening metallic shriek, like scraping metal, followed by a heavy thud. It was heard by survivors all over the ship. Some thought they had hit an iceberg. Others thought an engine had exploded. On the bridge, the crew saw no immediate alarms. What they couldn't see was the catastrophic failure happening at the bow. The locks holding the 55-ton bow visor, the front section of the ship that lifts up to allow cars on and off, had failed under the relentless pounding of the waves. The immense visor was now being torn from its hinges. At 1:02, the ship took a sudden sharp list to starboard, to its right side. The list was only about 15 degrees, but it was enough to cause panic. In the nightclub, the band's equipment slid across the stage. In the corridors, people fell over. The cheerful atmosphere vanished, replaced by confusion and growing fear. The crucial moment came at 1:15. The damaged bow visor was ripped completely free from the ship and vanished into the black, churning sea. This exposed the inner ramp, which was not designed to be watertight. The force of the waves smashed it open. A torrent of dark, violent water began pouring onto the open car deck. Thousands of tons of water flooded in within minutes. The ship's center of gravity was destroyed. The list immediately increased to a terrifying 30, then 40 degrees. The ship was no longer a vessel, it was a trap. The stairwells became near vertical shafts. The corridors became a chaotic maze of sliding furniture and screaming people. The lights flickered and died, plunging most of the ship into absolute darkness. At 1:22, A faint, panicked Mayday call was sent out. The female voice on the radio was frantic. "Mayday, Mayday, Estonia! Please!" The signal was weak and the ship's position was given incorrectly. The terror and chaos on the bridge were palpable in her voice. For the hundreds of people trapped below deck, there was no escape. For those who managed to claw their way to the open decks, the nightmare was just beginning. They were met with hurricane-force winds, freezing rain, and a deck tilted at an impossible angle. The ship was on its side. Lifeboats were either underwater or impossible to launch. People slid down the hull into the 10°C water. The first ship to respond to the Mayday call was another passenger ferry, the MS Mariella. When she arrived on the scene, her crew was met with a horrifying sight. The Estonia was gone. It had slipped beneath the waves at approximately 1:50 a.m., less than an hour after the first signs of trouble. All they could see were the ship's blinking emergency lights and hundreds of people in the water screaming for help. The storm made the rescue almost impossible. The massive ferries couldn't get close enough to the life rafts without endangering them further. Their own crews were at risk. The first helicopters only arrived after sunrise, winching up the few hypothermic survivors they could find. In the end, of the 989 people on board, only 137 survived. 852 lives were lost, swallowed by the cold Baltic Sea. The official investigation, conducted by the Joint Accident Investigation Commission, JAIC, concluded that the disaster was caused by the failure of the bow visor's locking mechanisms. They were not strong enough to withstand the force of the waves encountered that night. Once the visor failed and the ramp opened, the flooding of the open car deck, a design common to all ro-ro or roll-on, roll-off ferries, was catastrophic and irreversible. The sinking of the MS Estonia sent shockwaves through the maritime world. It led to sweeping changes in safety regulations. The SOLAS, or Safety of Life at Sea Convention, was updated. New rules were implemented for the design and inspection of bow doors on ro-ro ferries. Survivability standards were increased, and crew training for emergencies was intensified. The tragedy forced the industry to confront the inherent vulnerability of this type of ship design. Today, the wreck of the MS Estonia lies at a depth of around 80 meters. The site is designated as a final resting place and is protected by international treaty as a sea grave. No diving is permitted. It remains a silent, steel tomb for the 757 victims who were never recovered. For the families, the survivors, and the nations of Estonia and Sweden, the scar of that night has never fully healed. The MS Estonia no longer sails, but her memory serves as a permanent, chilling reminder of the unforgiving power of the sea and the terrible price paid when human engineering fails.